I guess it all started innocently enough. That's the way these things usually go, right? You stumble upon something you don't expect, a place you never thought you'd find yourself, and suddenly it becomes part of your routine. That's how it was with me and her. OnlyFans wasn't new to me. Hell, I'd spent plenty of nights scrolling through profiles, tossing a few dollars here and there for content that filled some void in the darkness. But when I found her, everything changed. Her username was simple: Madeline Rose. No over-the-top persona, no elaborate bio, just her name and a winking rose emoji at the end. There was a certain subtlety about her that immediately drew me in. She didn't try to hard sell anything or play into the typical gimmicks. Her photos were tastefully shot, her smile seemed genuine, and her eyes, God, her eyes, had a depth I hadn't seen in anyone else on the platform. I subscribed, of course. I had to. Her content wasn't as frequent as the other models, but that made each post feel like a rare treasure, something to savor. Most of the time she'd post short videos, chatting about her day, talking about mundane things like her favorite books or the new series she was binge watching. Occasionally there'd be a more risque photo or video, but even then it was never crass. It was artful, intentional, like she knew exactly how to keep you wanting more without giving everything away. I'm not proud to say that I became obsessed, but that's what happened. It wasn't overnight, of course. It crept in slowly, like a poison you don't notice until it's too late. At first, I'd just check in on her account after work, scroll through her posts, and feel a strange sense of comfort. But soon, that wasn't enough. I needed more. I found myself thinking about her at random times during the day, wondering what she was doing, what she was wearing, what her real life was like outside the screen. I wasn't the only one who felt that way, though. She had hundreds of followers, thousands even. Every post was flooded with comments, men begging for more, trying to get her attention. At first, I hated them, felt this irrational anger at the thought of anyone else looking at her the way I did. But eventually, I realized that I wasn't like them. I wasn't just another faceless subscriber. I was different. I was closer to her than anyone else. Things changed when she started doing live streams. It was an added perk for her premium subscribers, which of course I'd paid for. Her streams were low-key, never too flashy. She'd sit in front of the camera, usually in her living room, sipping tea or wine, talking casually to the viewers. There was something hypnotic about those streams. It felt like she was talking directly to me, like she could see me through the lens, even though I knew that wasn't possible. But still, every time she smiled, I felt like it was meant for me. Then one night, something strange happened. She was in the middle of a stream, talking about some new skincare routine she was trying, when a noise cut through the background. Faint, but distinct. A sharp knock, like someone at the door. Madeline paused, her eyes darting off screen. The chat exploded with comments, people asking what the noise was, if she was okay. She laughed it off, said it was probably just the wind or something. But I could tell by the way her eyes kept glancing toward the door that she was unsettled. The stream ended shortly after that, earlier than usual. She signed off with her usual wave and a quick, "Good night." But there was a tightness in her smile, a nervous edge that I hadn't seen before. I waited for her to post again, but hours passed, then a day, and there was nothing. No updates, no photos, no live streams. Silence. A week went by, and still, nothing. The comments section on her last post was filled with concerned fans, everyone asking the same question: where was Madeline? Had something happened to her? Why wasn't she posting anymore? Then a new account popped up, an Instagram profile with her name. It was clearly created by someone else, likely a friend or family member, because the bio read, "Help us find Madeline Rose. Missing since last Tuesday. Last seen leaving her apartment in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. If you have any information, contact NYPD." My heart sank when I read that. Missing? How could she be missing? I'd seen her just a week ago, sitting in her living room, chatting like everything was fine. How could she just disappear? The news spread quickly. Articles started popping up. Headlines like, "Popular OnlyFans model vanishes without a trace," and "Brooklyn woman disappears. Foul play suspected." The police got involved, of course. They launched a full investigation, canvassed her neighborhood, interviewed her friends, family, anyone who might know where she was. But days turned into weeks, and still, no sign of Madeline. I followed every development obsessively. I joined online forums, discussions, true crime groups where people speculated about what might have happened to her. Some thought she'd been abducted, taken by one of her deranged fans. Others believed she'd run away, trying to escape the pressures of her online fame. There were even a few conspiracy theorists who claimed she was hiding, staging her own disappearance for some elaborate publicity stunt. But I knew better. I'd watched her closely enough to know that something wasn't right. Madeline wasn't the type to just vanish without a word. She wouldn't leave her followers hanging like that. I could feel it deep down. Something had happened to her. Something terrible. It wasn't long before I started seeing them. The people, I mean. Cops, mostly, patrolling her neighborhood, asking around. Then there were the reporters, hanging around the coffee shops near her apartment, hoping for a scoop. Every day, there was more buzz, more whispers of what might have happened, but no one had answers. It was like she disappeared into thin air. One day I decided to take matters into my own hands. I wasn't just going to sit back and wait for the authorities to figure things out. I knew her better than anyone, didn't I? I'd watched her, studied her. I knew her routines, her favorite places, her habits. If anyone could find her, it was me. So I started digging. I went through her old videos, paying closer attention to the background details, the things I hadn't noticed before. I made a list of every location she'd mentioned, every spot she'd filmed in. Then, I began visiting them, one by one. It felt strange, at first, walking through the places I'd only seen on screen. There was something surreal about standing in the exact spots where she'd filmed her content, like stepping into a dream you'd had too many times. I visited the coffee shop she always talked about, the park where she'd filmed one of her streams, the bookstore she'd mentioned in passing. But none of it led anywhere. There was no sign of her. It was as if she'd never been there at all. Weeks passed, and the search grew colder. The cops had no new leads. The online buzz began to die down, and people started moving on. Except for me. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't stop thinking about her, wondering where she was, what had happened to her. I kept following the investigation, hoping for a break, but nothing ever came. The forums grew quiet, and even her most loyal fans began to lose hope. But not me. I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. And then, one night, as I was scrolling through her old posts for what felt like the 100th time, I saw it. A small detail I'd missed before. In one of her last live streams, she'd mentioned a new place she'd been going to, some hole-in-the-wall bar on the outskirts of Williamsburg. It was just a passing comment, something she'd thrown out while chatting about her week, but it stood out to me now. Could it be the key? Could that be where she went after that last stream? I had to find out. I drove to the bar the next day. It was a dingy little spot, tucked away on a side street, the kind of place you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. I parked across the street and watched for a while, hoping to catch a glimpse of her, or someone who might know her. But the hours passed, and there was nothing. Eventually, I went inside. It was quiet, nearly empty, except for the bartender and a few regulars nursing their drinks. I took a seat at the bar and ordered a beer, trying to act casual, like I wasn't there for anything other than a drink. After a while, I struck up a conversation with the bartender, asking if he remembered seeing a woman named Madeline, showing him a picture from her Instagram. He looked at it for a moment, then shook his head. "Sorry, man. Don't think I've seen her." I nodded, thanked him, and left, feeling the weight of disappointment settle over me. Another dead end, another failure. But then, as I was driving home, something occurred to me. Maybe I'd been going about this the wrong way. Maybe I wasn't looking in the right places. And that's when I knew what I had to do. The realization hit me like a freight train, so sudden and undeniable that I had to pull over just to catch my breath. Because you see, I'd been looking for her out there, thinking that she'd vanished into the world beyond my reach. But the truth was, I didn't need to find her. I already knew where she was. She's in my basement, tied to a chair, her once vibrant eyes now filled with fear every time I come downstairs. You see, I was never just a fan. I didn't watch her videos because I admired her. I watched them because I knew, deep down, that she was mine. And now, she is.
You never think it's going to happen to you. Not really. You see stories on the news, or hear rumors about stalkers or obsessed fans, but they feel like distant echoes, something that happens to someone else, not you. And that's exactly what I thought, right up until the moment I found myself living the nightmare. My name's Claire, but online I go by Lunalux. You might have seen me before. Maybe you've even subscribed to my OnlyFans. If you have, then you know I was one of the more popular girls on the platform, especially in the cosplay scene. I built up a loyal following pretty quickly, posting everything from behind the scenes, looks at my elaborate costumes to more intimate, risque content. I loved it too. It gave me freedom, financially and creatively. I could be myself, play dress-up for a living, and connect with people who appreciated my art. But what I didn't realize was how easily that connection could become something darker, something far more dangerous. It started small, like it always does. A guy named Mark, at least that's what he called himself, became one of my biggest fans. He was harmless at first, leaving sweet comments on my posts, tipping generously during my live streams. He seemed like any other devoted subscriber. But as time went on, I noticed that his comments were becoming more personal. He started referring to me as if we knew each other, as if there was something deeper between us. "You're so beautiful, Luna. I feel like we have a real connection. I wish I could meet you in person. We'd be perfect together." At first, I brushed it off. It's common to get overly familiar fans in this line of work, and I didn't want to discourage him. After all, he was paying, and keeping fans happy was part of the job. But something about Mark always unsettled me. There was a possessiveness in his messages, a sense that he thought he owned a piece of me. Then, one day, he sent me a message that crossed the line. "I'm going to come see you, Luna. I know where you live." My heart skipped a beat when I read that. How the hell did he know where I lived? I never shared personal details online, never posted anything that could give away my location. I felt a chill run down my spine, and for the first time since I'd started OnlyFans, I felt unsafe. I blocked him immediately. I didn't respond, didn't give him the satisfaction of knowing he'd rattled me. I figured that would be the end of it, that he'd get bored or find someone else to obsess over. But I was wrong. So wrong. The following days were quiet. I didn't hear from Mark again, and I started to relax, thinking maybe I'd overreacted. But then, one night, I came home from a photo shoot to find a note slipped under my door. My stomach turned as I picked it up, unfolding the piece of paper with trembling hands. "See you soon, Luna." There was no signature, no indication of who had left it, but I knew it was him. I called the police, of course. I told them everything, the messages, the note, how I thought one of my subscribers might be stalking me. They listened, took down my statement, and promised to send a patrol car to check the area. But beyond that, there wasn't much they could do. "We'll keep an eye on things," they said. "But unless he makes a direct threat or you see him in person, there's not much we can go on." I tried to go about my life after that, but it was impossible to shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I left my apartment, I felt like there were eyes on me, like Mark was lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment. I stopped doing live streams, stopped posting new content, too paranoid to share any part of my life online. And then, one night, it happened. I was coming home from a late-night grocery run, my arms full of bags, when I felt it. The presence behind me. I didn't even have time to turn around before a hand clamped over my mouth and an arm wrapped around my waist, yanking me back into the alley beside my building. My heart was racing, my thoughts spinning. I tried to scream, but the sound was muffled by the hand covering my mouth. I struggled, kicking, thrashing, but whoever had me was too strong. And then I heard his voice, low and familiar. "Shh, Luna. It's okay. It's me, Mark. I've finally found you." Terror shot through me. It was him. He'd found me. My worst nightmare was happening in real time, and I was powerless to stop it. He dragged me into a van parked at the end of the alley, and before I knew it, I was tied up. My hands bound behind my back, a gag stuffed in my mouth. I tried to fight, to kick the door as hard as I could, but it was no use. Mark just smiled down at me, like he'd won some kind of sick prize. "You're mine now," he whispered, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You're finally mine." For days, maybe weeks, I'm not sure. He kept me in a dark basement somewhere far from my home, somewhere no one would ever find me. He took away my phone, my wallet, everything that could identify me. There was no way to tell anyone where I was, no way to reach out for help. And in that time, he made me do things, horrible things. At first, he wanted me to keep doing what I'd been doing online. He set up his own cameras, made me wear my usual outfits, perform my usual routines. But there was no camera between us now, no screen to hide behind. This wasn't for my fans anymore. It was for him. Every time he touched me, I wanted to scream. Every time he made me pose for his twisted fantasies, I wanted to die. But I couldn't. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I'd get through this. I'd survive, somehow. Days turned into weeks, and the longer I stayed trapped in that basement, the more desperate I became. I tried to find ways out, to loosen the ropes around my wrists, or pick the lock on the door when he wasn't watching. But every time I got close, he caught me, and the punishment was always worse. Then one day, I overheard him talking on the phone. He was sloppy, careless, probably because he thought I'd given up by then. But I hadn't. I listened closely, picking up bits and pieces of his conversation, and that's when I learned that he'd gotten lazy. He wasn't locking the door at night anymore, at least not all the way. That night, when I was sure he was asleep, I made my move. I inched my way over to the door, heart pounding in my chest as I reached for the handle. It was loose, just like he'd said. I pushed it open slowly, trying not to make a sound. And then I ran. I ran faster than I ever thought possible. My legs burning, my lungs screaming for air as I bolted out of that house and into the night. I didn't stop until I reached a main road where a passing car finally stopped and helped me. I'll never forget the look on the driver's face when they saw me. Disheveled, covered in bruises, barely able to speak. The police found Mark the next day. He didn't even try to run. When they arrested him, he just kept saying that I was his, that I belonged to him, that we were meant to be together. But he's wrong. He never owned me. He never will. It's been months since I escaped, and every day has been a battle to reclaim my life. I moved to a new city, changed my name, tried to start over, but the memories of what happened still haunt me. I can't sleep without seeing his face in my nightmares. I can't go outside without feeling like someone's watching me. But despite all that, I'm not a victim. I refuse to be. And that's why I did what I did last week. I visited him, Mark, in jail. The moment I stepped into that visitor's room, my heart raced. He didn't know I was coming, and when they brought him in, the shock on his face was almost satisfying. He looked smaller than I remembered, weaker. The man who had terrorized me for weeks was now behind bars, powerless. I felt a strange sense of control wash over me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. "You look good," he said, his voice as smooth as ever. "I knew you'd come." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. For a while, we just stared at each other, the silence between us heavy, charged with everything that had happened. He kept waiting for me to speak, to say something, anything, but I let the tension build, watching the flicker of uncertainty cross his face. Finally, I leaned in, close enough that he could feel the heat of my breath. "I came here to tell you one thing," I said, my voice low, steady. "You didn't break me." His smile faltered for the first time. "I survived you," I continued, my anger bubbling up with every word. "And now, you get to rot in here, knowing that I'm free. You'll never touch me again. You'll never control me again." His eyes widened, and for the first time I saw fear. Real fear. The tables had turned, and he knew it. He tried to say something, but the words got caught in his throat. All the power he thought he had over me was gone. I stood up, ready to leave. But before I walked away, I gave him one last look. "I want you to think about this, Mark. Every single day, every hour, while you're rotting in this cell, I want you to remember that you lost. You didn't win, you didn't break me, and you didn't take my life away. I took yours." I could see it then, the defeat in his eyes, the realization that he was nothing, that all of his fantasies and delusions had crumbled to dust. He was trapped now, and I was free. The roles had reversed completely, and he was powerless to change it. As I turned to leave, I felt lighter than I had in months. I walked out of that prison with my head held high, knowing that I had finally reclaimed the power he had stolen from me. I had faced my demon, and I had won. Mark may have thought he owned me, but now he belonged to me, trapped behind bars, haunted by the memory of what he'd done, and forever living with the knowledge that I had escaped. And for the first time since my nightmare began, I felt free, truly free. The door to the visitor's room clicked shut behind me, and with it, the last hold Mark had over my life. I was no longer Luna Lux, the girl he thought he controlled. I was Claire, the survivor, and nothing, not him, not his delusions, not his obsession, could take that away from me ever again.
I never thought I'd be the type of person who'd get sucked into something like OnlyFans, but here I am, scrolling through profiles, clicking on videos, and paying for content I didn't know I needed. It's not even about the sex, at least not entirely. There's something more intimate about it, about seeing people at their most vulnerable, as though they're revealing more than just their bodies. It's like peeking through a keyhole into their lives, their secrets, and in the process, feeling like you're a part of their world. At first, it was just innocent curiosity. I'd stumbled upon a few profiles here and there, following the usual suspects, models, influencers, the types of women you'd expect to find on such a platform. But then I came across her. Her username was simple, Liam. No flashy bios or gimmicky hashtags. Just her name and a short description. I show what I want, and I want what I show. Something about that intrigued me, though I didn't know why at the time. I clicked on her profile, and the first thing I noticed was her face, angelic, with a hint of mischievousness in her smile. She wasn't like the other girls I'd seen. There was something darker about her, something deeper. Her videos weren't highly produced. They felt raw, almost voyeuristic, as if she didn't care whether or not you were watching, but still had this way of drawing you in. I subscribed, of course. Who wouldn't? She didn't post every day, which made her content all the more tantalizing. Every time a new video dropped, it felt like a gift, something rare and precious. And with each video, I felt like I was getting closer to her, like I knew her better than any other person scrolling through her profile. At first, it was the usual fare, candid videos of her lounging around her apartment, trying on different outfits, talking casually to the camera. But as the weeks went by, her videos became different. She began talking to the camera in a more intimate way, almost as if she were speaking directly to me. "I know why you're here," she whispered in one video, her lips curling into a sly grin. "You're not like the others, are you? You want something more, something real." I don't know why, but her words felt like a challenge, like she knew I was watching, like she knew that I wasn't just another faceless subscriber. I began to look forward to her new uploads, waiting with bated breath to see what she'd say next, how far she'd push the envelope. Then, about a month into my subscription, she started posting videos from outside her apartment. She'd film herself walking through the city, visiting different locations, restaurants, parks, and on one occasion, a dimly lit alleyway that looked strangely familiar. I couldn't place it at the time, but something about it gnawed at me, a vague sense of déjà vu that I couldn't shake. The videos from outside grew more frequent, more personal. She'd film herself sitting at a cafe, staring into the camera as though she were waiting for someone. There was one video where she walked through a bustling street market, the camera angled just so that her face filled the frame while the crowd blurred behind her. "I wonder if any of you are close to me," she mused in one video, her voice dripping with mystery. "Maybe one of you has passed me by without even knowing. Maybe one of you is closer than you think." It was at this point that I became obsessed. I started noticing things in her videos, landmarks, street signs, the names of shops in the background. With a little digging, I realized that she was in the same city as me. A chill ran down my spine when I confirmed it. What were the odds? Out of all the places in the world, she was here. Liam was here. I didn't know what to do with that information at first. Should I reach out to her, send her a message, tell her that I was nearby? No, that would be creepy. I didn't want to come across as some stalker. But then again, wasn't that what this whole thing was about? She put herself out there, revealing these intimate parts of her life for strangers to see. So, wasn't I just reciprocating? The next time she posted a video, she was in a park, sitting on a bench, the camera positioned on the ground in front of her. The backdrop was unmistakable. The same park I passed through every morning on my way to work. I froze when I realized it. She had to be close, so close that I could almost reach out and touch her. That night, I couldn't sleep. All I could think about was her, sitting on that bench, so oblivious to how near she was to me. I imagined walking up to her, striking up a conversation, telling her how much I admired her work. Maybe she'd smile and invite me to sit down. Maybe we'd talk for hours. Maybe, just maybe, she'd see me as more than just a subscriber. The next morning, I took a different route to work. I detoured through the park, hoping to catch a glimpse of her, though I told myself it was just a coincidence. She wasn't there, of course. But as I sat on that same bench where she'd filmed, I felt closer to her than ever before. I wasn't just another faceless viewer. I was part of her world now, whether she knew it or not. Over the next few days, I found myself retracing her steps, visiting the places she'd filmed, imagining her there, feeling the ghost of her presence in every corner of the city. It wasn't enough, though. I needed more. I needed to see her, really see her, not just through the lens of a camera. I started digging deeper into her online presence. Her OnlyFans was surprisingly sparse in terms of personal information. But with some effort, I found her Instagram. From there, it wasn't hard to piece together the rest. Her favorite coffee shop, the gym she went to, even the building she lived in. I don't know when the line between curiosity and obsession blurred, but by the time I realized it, I was in too deep. I started going to her gym, casually working out in the background while she did her sets. I sat at the same coffee shop she frequented, sipping my drink and watching her from a distance as she typed away on her laptop. I didn't approach her though, not yet. I wanted to savor the anticipation, the thrill of knowing that I was so close without her even realizing it. But one day, that changed. She posted a video, different from the others. She was sitting on her bed, her face drawn, her eyes tired. "I think someone's following me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I've noticed it for a while now, but lately it's been getting worse. I see the same faces, the same people, wherever I go. I don't know if I'm just being paranoid, but I can't shake the feeling that someone's watching me. My heart raced as I watched the video. Did she know? Could she feel my presence, even though I'd been so careful to keep my distance? The next day, I followed her home. She didn't see me, of course. I was too good at that by now. I watched from across the street as she unlocked the door to her building and slipped inside. For a moment, I considered going up to her, knocking on her door, confessing everything. But something held me back. That night, she posted another video. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. "I'm scared," she said, her voice cracking. "I don't know what to do. I keep seeing him, everywhere I go. I'm afraid to leave my apartment. I'm afraid he's going to do something." She was talking about me. She had to be. The next day I followed her again. This time, though, I didn't stop at the door to her building. I followed her inside, my heart pounding in my chest as I ascended the stairs behind her, my footsteps silent, calculated. When she reached her door, she hesitated, her hand shaking as she fumbled with the keys. For a brief moment, she glanced over her shoulder, her eyes locking with mine. That's when I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us in an instant. She barely had time to scream before my hand was over her mouth, my other arm wrapping around her body, pulling her back against me. She struggled, of course, but it didn't matter. I was stronger, faster. And as I dragged her into her apartment, slamming the door shut behind us, I realized that this was what I'd been waiting for all along. The intimacy I'd craved wasn't about seeing her naked or hearing her whispered fantasies. It was about this. About having her, completely and utterly, with no one to intervene. I can still hear her muffled screams as I dragged her to the bedroom, her nails clawing at my arms, her eyes wide with terror. I didn't stop until her body went limp, her breath slowing, then ceasing altogether. And now, as I sit here in her apartment, staring at the lifeless body of the woman I thought I loved, I realize the truth. I was never her fan. I was her killer.